Georgie, welcome to Female Founder World.
Thank you for having me.
For people who don't know Billie, what have you built?
We built a women's shave and body brand. We started DTC, but now we are national everywhere in the US.
Okay, I feel like that's a very humble explanation of what you built. I feel like you built like a category defining personal care brand.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely saw an opportunity in the women's shave category. So I can tell you a little bit about sort of the background and sort of the genesis of it. But when we saw, this was like 2016, we saw that, there were these new startup companies in the men's razor space disrupting those categories.
Like Harry's?
Yep.
Yep.
And when we started to dig into the women's razor category, what we realized was even the sort of legacy women's shave brands, they were all sort of started as men's brands and then like spun into women's brands. And so what that meant was women were really an afterthought in this category, and that came into play in a number of different ways. So one, they were paying a pink tax on a product that, a men's razor, a women's razor, pay more for the women's razor. The way women were being portrayed in the category was very antiquated, to the point where, nobody wanted to show women with body hair, like shame.
Just so weird when you're a razor company.
I know. It's the way you literally show a product demonstration. And women were really, for over a century sort of shamed into like having body hair, and that was a marketing strategy to buy razors. And then from a product perspective, most women shave in the shower. It's sort of different dynamics. You're not in front of a basin looking in a mirror. So just even from a product design, we felt like we could create a product that was designed specifically for the way women shave. So a few factors, and nobody was really tackling the women's shave market. I think even as we were talking to investors, a lot of like male investors, they sort of question, we can see that there'll be traction on the men's side because men care about shaving, but do women really care? And so we felt really bullish that there was an opportunity that was being overlooked. You could see it playing out on the men's side. There was no reason it couldn't play out on the women's side, and that's where we saw the opportunity.
What are some milestones that you've hit? So I know that the business was acquired a couple of years ago, last year, for what, 310 million?
310 at the end of 2021.
You're in Walmart.
So we're in Walmart. Yeah. So a few milestones. We launched in November of 2017 after building the company for about a year before then. And we launched as a DTC brand. And it was important for us at the very beginning to sort of try and launch with as much impact as possible to really sort of stand out in the category. There were a lot of other DTC brands out there at the time in different categories, but they sort of felt all quite the same. And I wanted to really make sure that, Billie sort of had its really own strong identity and really knew what it stood for from the very beginning. And I think that really sort of paid off because, we got a ton of press traction in the beginning, and sort of by day 3, we had sold to all 50 states. And then
because of that press coverage, was that the main?
Yeah, because of that press coverage. I mean, we really didn't have any paid media at that point or anything like that. And then sort of I'm a big believer in momentum. And so once you start to get momentum, you need to sort of, fuel the fire. And we were able to do that. And so by month 4, we had reached our, 12-month targets.
Wow.
We raised along the way. We made some campaigns that went viral.
I remember all of this. I remember scrolling on Instagram and seeing these images and being like, wow, like this is a very clear, you have a real stake in the ground about what this brand stands for.
Yeah. And so that really put us on the map. I would say we did this campaign 6 months in called Project Body Hair, and we were the first brand in the women's shaving category to actually like show body hair and then say that shaving is a choice and not an expectation, which was unfortunately a really new message in this century-old category. But then, quickly, because we were able to gain a lot of traction, we were approached by a big company to potentially be acquired. And we actually signed a deal, but the Federal Trade Commission reviewed that deal and, that was eventually blocked. Ooh. So then we pivoted and we were able to find someone else that wanted to acquire us, Edgewell Personal Care, and they were able to acquire us at the end of 2021, right before we were going nationally into Walmart stores in the beginning of 2022. And then in 23, we sort of launched everywhere. So now you can find us like Target, CVS, all grocery, all drug, all these places.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So thank you. It's been a really wild, intense ride, but yeah, it was a lot of fun, and we were fortunate. There were many things that came into play that allowed us to sort of see that journey, but luck and timing are definitely one of them as well.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning. So we have a mix of people listening. We've got folks who already have businesses, they're small businesses, and small business, the definition of that is actually businesses that are doing millions of revenue a year. So like that's not some condescending term. Small businesses are genuinely the backbone of the economy. We also have people who are thinking they've got like these big category defining ideas like what you had. And I'm curious about like what the lessons are from your launch that you can apply to both of those folks, about how you make an impact, how you get those first customers, and how you really like set yourself apart as a brand. Because at the end of the day, you're selling razors, you're selling something that, you haven't like hugely innovated on a product, but you've created this sense of brand around it that is so strong. Yeah. And your background is in advertising and marketing. That's where you came from.
Right.
What lessons do you have for people about how to set apart right from the beginning?
So I think, when you talk to investors, a lot of people talk about product market fit, which is obviously very important. But again, we had razors and we know people are using razors. And so product market fit is important. And we optimized the razor and designed it to make it, tailor it specifically to the way women shave and thought about a number of different things that sort of facilitated that. But brand market fit is something that's super important. And I think that's really where we saw an opportunity to claim our mark in this category. And so, who is going to buy that? You need to be very clear on like, what is your brand? Who is buying you? And a brand to me isn't just your logo and how you look. It's like a person, right? Like how you look is one thing, but how you think and how you behave and how you feel, like all of those things need to be defined. And that's sort of, and defining that and then knowing who that appeals to, and hopefully the market is big, you're talking to a market that's big enough and that would be attracted to your brand. I think you have to realize it might not be for everyone. So, when we launched our project body hair, there were a lot of people that were like, this is disgusting, stop showing me body hair. And we kind of knew that going into it. We knew that this would maybe ruffle some feathers and that not everyone would be supportive of maybe the message that we had, but that was okay because we felt really strongly like this is core to our DNA. We felt that there was enough people out there that would, that this message would resonate with, and that was okay, right? And that's what we saw. And it's a little bit of a gamble because I think when you try and appease everyone and you become this like really like beige vanilla brand, you sort of don't stand for anything, and then you're sort of people can forget you very easily.
That makes a lot of sense. For people who are kind of trying to define who they are as a brand and who they are for, what are some of those questions that you ask, or like what's the documentation that you put together? Like how do you externalize that in a way that then you can communicate it to a team, to a creative agency? Like what are you actually putting together?
Yeah. So, I mean, that is the documentation is super important, particularly as you scale and sort of the brand becomes bigger than you or a couple of people that have initially started like the kernel of the idea. But I think it's we now have like 100-page brand book that gets like, if we were a shape, what shape would we be? And all of these sorts of things.
What shape would you be? What's the answer?
We would be like a circle.
Yeah.
Or like if you were a subject in school, we're recess, But so we've gotten now like really, really into it. But in the beginning, I think you are looking at sort of, you want your visual ID and your guidelines on how you show up, right? And then you sort of have tone of voice. And then you can have, as you think about like bringing like how we represent women, like what are the things that we're doing there, and you just sort of like you just kind of keep building and getting more until you sort of figure out what subject you are in school.
Yeah.
But and the more detail and the more color you can bring, like what's the world, you're building a world.
Yeah.
When you're building a brand, you're building a world. And so the more, you start small, but then as it keeps growing, you just keep adding to it,
Yeah. I think this is so important as well as a business is growing, because when you start off, you can have this, maybe you as the founder, you're the customer, and so everything feels really intuitive to you, and so you can have that gut sense check of like, yes, this, no, yes, no. But then once other people are responsible for making those decisions for you, you need to have this like very clear.
Right. You need to have a sort of a clear roadmap. You need to bring the right people along. That's really important. And I think a brand is a sort of living, breathing thing. It evolves. And so, even Billie day one to where we are today, it's evolved, and not just in look and feel, but also how we think and how we want to communicate with our communities and whatnot. So I think that's important that you keep it fresh.
Okay, so I want to continue talking about this getting traction, getting your first customers piece. So you had this immediate success through press coverage.
Yeah.
This is back in
2017.
2017. Okay. Then what are you doing? You're doing paid ads. What else was working to kind of get those first customers in the door?
Yeah, it was really press and paid.
Yeah.
And those two working hand in hand. And then at the time, I mean, even now really, it was Facebook, Instagram. Those were the big levers. And, we sort of did, influencers and affiliate marketing, but really the, search, things like that. But really sort of the big driver at the time, this is, 2018, was Instagram, Facebook.
If you were going to do it again now, what would you do differently? What channels would you use?
I think now, paid social is still sort of, I think, the main channel, but the dynamic has changed, right? And it's become more expensive to acquire customers. And I think, sort of 2010 to 2020, you're seeing all of these like purely DTC brands. And now what we're seeing is this omni-channel approach, even for really young brands. So for Billie, I think we were 4 years in before we went into retail. I think what you're seeing now is omni-channel is sort of from the outset. People are thinking about, all right, like we might get a little bit of traction and prove that we have that product market fit, that brand market fit, but pretty quickly, are we going into Amazon or are we going into a retailer? How are we going to get that scale? Because your paid dollars only go so far these days.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about fundraising and how you get something like this off the ground. So, some folks might be building a business where they are bootstrapping and they're profitable and that's what they're doing. But for somebody who wants to grow really quickly and get to like a really big exit in a short amount of time, you need external money to kind of help you do that.
Right.
I want to understand what your fundraising journey has looked like and what are some of those lessons that you have now that you're like on the other side of this for somebody who's just getting started.
My co-founder and I, we were first-time founders, right? So we didn't have sort of a track record to be able to immediately raise money. And, we took a lot of meetings and got a lot of no's in the beginning. And the first check that we actually got was through an accelerator here in New York, and they gave us $100,000. And we were really, really scrappy. So we pretty much built the entire business with the exception of an inventory order. But, doing...
So you didn't have any product, but you had the brand and the website.
Exactly. And, we had like samples of the product, just not, mass produced. And along the way, though, we kept in touch with all the investors that were sort of saying, okay, we'll see where you get to and whatnot. And I think for us, showing progress was the best way to fundraise. So just keeping in touch and then like, hey, like, remember how we said we were going to do this? Now we've done that. And we're just keeping you up to date. And that's always been the best way for us and our experience to fundraise. It was rather than kind of create this big process and whatnot, it was just sort of like, deliver what you said you were going to deliver, whether that's like developing the product, developing the brand, or once you launch, getting that traction, and then sort of keeping up the conversations with investors so that when the time does come to raise, you're raising. So by the time we launched in November of 2017, we had around 1.5 million. And then, and then that sort of, we kept growing. And as, again, like we sort of raised then 6 months in, and then a year in, and the raises just kept getting bigger and bigger, and we kept using them to fuel the momentum.
Is that terrifying?
Is it terrifying?
Do you just get used to it when you're bringing in these big fundraisers and you have these investors who are looking at you and the responsibility just snowballs as the business grows?
I think you are in a whirlwind, right? And so you do, like, you'll raise money, and that's great, and you have like 2 seconds to celebrate, and then you have to sort of figure out how you're deploying the money and like making good on that money, right? And that investment. And so I think sort of you do have these moments where you're like, oh, that's a lot of money, and all of a sudden we got to do it. But I think you're so focused at like the task at hand that it's always like that was the one step to get to the next step. And so you're always kind of looking ahead, and things happened really quickly in our, by the time we were acquired, we were 4 years old. We'd already been through one acquisition that was blocked by the Federal Trade Commission. So things just kind of developed very, very quickly. And so we were always focused on like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing?
I ask that because I think a lot of people might have a big idea, but they are just really intimidated by the thought of how big it could be, and actually going after the funding that they need to get the scale that maybe the idea deserves. And so I am always curious about folks who have done this on a really large scale about like, what is it internally that just allows you to have that confidence in yourself to kind of bring an idea like this to fruition and have this kind of impact?
Yeah, I think for me, I truly believed that like this, like this was a brand that didn't exist, and as a consumer or a customer, I would want it to exist, right? And so, it was a lot of fun. Like in many ways, it sort of was very natural. It was a lot of fun to build, and I think from the beginning we were able to see like, oh, people really like this, and like people are sharing their razor like they would a makeup brand or whatnot, and people were getting really excited. And so I think, there was when you launch, you sort of feel a little bit like you're out there and you're naked, and you're like, I think this is good. I don't know if anyone else will, and I think once we got a little bit of validation, then we felt sort of encouraged to double down and to sort of scale it and to just really like chase after that momentum.
How long into the business did you start taking a paycheck out? This is something that I think a lot of founders don't talk about, in that it actually does take a lot of sacrifice when you're getting started to get a business to a point where you can pay yourself. Yeah,
I think it would have been a year in. Right. And I left a paying job in advertising, and so that year, that sort of your longer than a year, but maybe like 15 months or something, you change your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You change your lifestyle. You make sacrifices, and you really, really focus on the business and all the luxuries that you had. You kind of, you don't look at shops anymore. You just focus on the business. Obviously, I was really lucky. I was with my husband, and so sort of our day-to-day living needs were covered, and that's a big privilege that I had. But yeah, you're being your most sensible self.
I want to spend a sec just talking about this failed acquisition. So you were going to sell the business. It didn't happen. I think it was P&G that you were looking to sell to. Okay, talk me through how that happened, and then how it fell down and how you handled it, because I'm sure that would have been insanely stressful.
Yes. So at the beginning of 2020, right before the pandemic.
What a time.
It was a year. So at the beginning of that year, we announced that we had signed a deal with P&G
Oh, wow. So it had been announced. It was in the press.
It was announced, right? That the deal had been signed, but it was going through a Federal Trade Commission review. And so if they said it was okay, then it would go forward, but it needed the review first. And then, so we knew that would take, it can take time. It can take a year. And so we were just in this waiting game. And meanwhile, the whole world shut down with the pandemic. And, so we were dealing with a lot of different things, like managing the team during this period, making sure that the business continued to sort of operate, flourish, like make sure sales were going well. And in the meantime, in the background, this review was happening, and we would, answer questions as needed and do interviews as needed and, sort of provide all the information. And then at the end of that year, they said...
So this took a full year?
It took a full year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that normal?
Yes, yeah, it is normal. It takes time to review. They believed this deal would be anti-competitive and that they didn't want to let it go through. And so I think... I truly thought it was going through. So we were... And obviously, as sort of more questions came, like we started to get a little bit nervous towards the end of that review period. But at the beginning, I was like,
"Yeah,
we're Billie, like we're not huge. It's not this like two entities merging, but
Unilever and P&G are not merging."
Exactly. I was like, and so we were surprised, and I think a lot of people are now sort of. In the investor community, a lot of people were surprised that this was the outcome. And so from there, we were really fortunate that Edgewell, who owns Schick, and they actually they had a relationship with us from the beginning because their blades were the Billie blades.
Okay.
And so they were able to, and we've had a really, great relationship with them from the beginning, and they were able to see like from launch where we had grown to. And so those conversations happened after that sort of deal fell through.
Hold on, I need to know what you did on the day that the deal fell through.
I'm not even sure I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can remember the feeling, but I'm not sure I remember.
The day.
The day. On the spot right here, I can't remember. But it was pretty dark. I mean, it was such a shock. I think even towards the end when we were like, "Ooh, is this going to happen?"
Yeah.
And we were sort of trying to put bets on like 60-40 or what do we think now? But I think to hear it was definitely difficult.
Yeah.
But really fortunate we were able to sort of, we had these pre-existing relationship and the business, thankfully, was in a really good position through 2020 because all the retailers shut down. So a lot of ecommerce businesses and DTC businesses actually flourished during that time. And so we were really fortunate, and we were able to figure out an agreement with Edgewell that went through another Federal Trade Commission review, but a shorter one this time. And I think that was maybe 6 months, and then right before Thanksgiving, we found out that was going to go through.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does your life change after something like that happens? You're still in the business?
Yes. So still in the business, still operating. I mean, I think the interesting thing is Billie, when we were sold, we were only 4 years old. So that still felt like, we were just starting to grow up, right? We were about to go into Walmart, and now we're in all the retailers. But I think I still very much felt like we're in our infancy. Maybe we're a teenager, but we still have ways to go. And so, it's nice that we don't have to think about fundraising anymore. A lot of the operations, we have the support of this, huge company to go. We sort of negotiated the Walmart deal and to get into Walmart, but to get everywhere else, Target, CVS, all the places, that was sort of relying on Edgewell's big sales network. There would be no way that Billie on its own would be able to go from like one retailer to all retailers, and you don't see other DTC brands do it that way. So that was really because of the acquisition we were able to grow and scale so far. But I think it's still a really exciting time, and we still have our team. We're still based here in Soho, and there's still, many things that we want to do. So things have changed, obviously, day to day, but we still have our team here, and we're still building, and sort of the brand continues to be the brand. And so in some ways, I think it's allowed us to scale a lot quicker than if we were just on our own.
Yeah. Okay, switching gears for a little bit, because I want to talk about finding those big retail partnerships. And by the time you were going into Walmart, Billie was already this brand that I think already had great recognition. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who wanted to work with you, and you had your pick at that point. What are some things that people might not understand about going into one of those big box retailers? How does it work? What are the surprises? What are the things that you need to watch out for?
I mean, it's a whole new world. Like, going from DTC to retail is a whole new...
And on that scale as well.
And on that scale, right? Like, we were going into 4,000 Walmart stores.
That was your first experience with retail?
Yes.
Wow.
And so we worked with a third-party company that actually, they sort of approached us very early in the beginning just to form a relationship. Should we ever think about...
Like a broker?
Yeah, like a broker.
Yep. Also something people don't talk about.
Right. Because I've never gone into Walmart and my co-founder had never gone into Walmart and it's a beast, right? Like, even to set up a SKU in their system requires someone that's like done it a million times. Like, it's a whole thing. And to understand, what the right deal is, and like, what can you ask for, and where, like, someone that like clearly has done it before, has done it for other brands, has a good relationship with the retailer, so that, they're also kind of scouting these new brands for the retailers as well. So it's kind of like a two-way sort of situation. But I think the big thing for us was making sure that when we launched with as much sort of in-store theater and presence as possible. That was really important because, retail is such a busy environment. It's not like your website where, it's all your real estate and you can sell it however you want and show all these beautiful imagery. Like, you need to stand out on shelf. And so a big part of, how we were thinking about going in and launching was, again, launch with impact. Like, that, this is the theme, right? When we were in DTC, how do we have as much impact? And when we go into retail, how do we have as much impact? So that people literally notice that you're there. Yeah. We had to change packaging because obviously...
ask this, because these businesses that are built on e-com and D2C, like... And then when you go on shelf in a store, your packaging must need to completely change.
It changes, like, and your packaging needs to now sell. Like, but when you're using your website to sell, and then it doesn't matter what it comes in, really, then now you're sort of saying, like, this is what you get in this box. So that was a big thing. Logistically, I mean, building up inventory to make sure that, like, you have enough to fulfill for these 4,000 stores, and then if they all get bought out, like, you can refill. So all of that was, you kind of need someone to hold your hand. I mean, you can try and do it on your own. It's just the margin for error is quite
wide. Gives me anxiety to think about doing that.
So I would, if I was to do it again, I would go with a broker again.
Can we demystify the broker piece a little bit more? How do these folks work? Like, obviously you need to kind of sell it to them as well. To the broker? To the broker, right? Like, they have to want to work with you. They get their pick of who they want to work with if they're a good one. How do those relationships form, and what does it look like? Like, are you paying them like a commission? Do most brands pay commission, or is it on a flat rate? What does that arrangement, how does it shake out?
So we had a couple of relationships with different brokers, but the one that we ended up working with to go into Walmart, they approached us really early on. So they're also scouting brands and seeing, like, who's a potential and sort of forming that relationship. And so I think at the end of the day, you just want people that you feel comfortable working with and that you trust and that will be good partners to you. They obviously need to have really good, strong relationships with the buyers at the retailers, so that, you can get that sort of end cap display or the on-shelf signage.
And for people who don't know what end cap is, that's
Those are the displays at the end of the aisle.
Where you walk past and you're like, oh, I want that thing.
Right.
I'm going to walk in the aisle and get it.
Usually, and like sometimes the products are there and there's like signage, but it's like a billboard in store.
And that's a good get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want as many of those as you can get. And so then you work together and, you know, they help, they bring sort of the retailer and the brands together. They sort of help you with the assortment and how, like, you know, they kind of know a little bit how the buyers think. And so they're sort of coaching you throughout the whole thing until you hopefully can sell in. And then from there, it's sort of like setting you up in the system and making sure, like, they'll help you with sort of how we think about, you know, how many units do we need from the get-go and all of that. And they get paid on a commission once you sell.
Okay.
So once you're sort of in and selling product, then there's commission.
I want to quickly talk about subscription because I know that early on when Billie first launched subscription, I think was like quite a big piece of it when you guys first, does that continue to be a big piece of the business?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to understand like how you figure out whether your product should have a subscription, how you price that, and if there are any tools that people can use to kind of set up that kind of process.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were only subscription for our razors and the refill blades. And I think subscription is great. It's a great business model, but you can't make every product a subscription. It just doesn't make sense. And so I think if the product makes sense to have a subscription, then go for it. But I think there are many products that just
it got a bit sexy for a while there for everyone to have a subscription, I think.
Yeah, and exactly. And some things I think were offered as a subscription that really were like, are you sure? Like, I know that makes sense. Yeah, I know that makes sense for you as a business, but I don't know if that makes sense for the customer.
Yeah.
So I think always, like, with every decision, just putting yourself in the customer's shoes is like the first thing you need to do and be like, does that make sense? Would I buy that? Why would I buy that? Is it priced right? You know, at this point, like, everyone's competing with Amazon, probably Amazon Prime. So, like, how does shipping go into it? Because people don't want to pay for shipping. So that's how we think about subscription. It's now a portion of our business, not the entire business. We are on Amazon. We are in all the retail shops. So, but it's an important part of the business. And I think for a lot of customers, it just makes sense for them. Like, they don't have to think about it, set it and forget it. Like, they shave. They know how often they shave. They know how often they need refills. You know, we ship it to your door for free. So it still works. It's just, it's not 100% of our business anymore.
I want to talk about management and leadership and what your style is. You obviously had, you know, you'd built this career in advertising. It's not like you were 22 and coming into starting your own business. Like, you had a little bit of experience under your belt. But I am really curious about what's kind of helped you up level as a founder as you've kind of been building the business, because something that I see with all of these founders that I'm speaking with is like the business grows as they are able to grow themselves as well. What are some things that have helped you? Yeah.
So I think prior to Billie, I probably had managed maybe like 4 people under me.
How many people are there now?
And now at Billie, I think there's about 65, 70. Yeah, not 4. And so you sort of are learning on the job for sure. And obviously it doesn't jump from like 0 to 70. You know, you're sort of growing with time. And then I think bringing on at the right time someone who is like is focused on HR, and a people person, they sort of become your counterpart to sort of like, okay, here's like, they've got experience scaling at other places, you know, the right things to put in place, and they're kind of a coach to you. But a lot of it is also just, I think you have to figure out what kind of leader you are and what's like natural and true to you, and then sort of coupling that with resources or a HR person or whatnot to sort of professionalize your leadership is important. But I think we, you know, for me, like, Billie is just the people. Like, it's the people in the company that make this brand, that make these products. And so, you know, who we brought in, recruiting was something that we cared a lot about, and were really picky with, you know, who we wanted to bring in. And then I think just making sure that people were really good at what they do, were like absolute sort of like entrepreneurs at heart. Like they were able to like, there's mess and there's chaos, but we can figure out, like we have this like can-do attitude. We can figure out the solution to this problem that we don't know exists yet.
Yeah.
And I think figuring out like how to get all the teams working. So in the beginning, you sort of hire these specialists and you have a number of individual contributors.
Yes.
Right? But once you start to scale, you need those individual contributors to become managers, to become cross collaborators, to be peers.
It's actually really hard.
It is hard, and it's sort of a little bit trial and error, and you realize like some people are really good as individual contributors and they're not actually really good at being managers, or they're not the best collaborators, which makes it like difficult as you want to grow and scale. And so, you know, I think you're sort of like learning as you go and pulling in the resources along the way to sort of help you figure it out and navigate kind of the growth trajectory that you're on.
So the last thing that we ask everyone on the show is just for a resource. And that is something that for folks who want to build something to the scale of what you've built, what book should they read? What podcast should they listen to? What habit should they start doing? What's something that you recommend?
So habit-wise, I would say I think it's really important that you be a ruthless prioritizer. You really have to there's a million things competing for your attention, not all some of them more urgent than others. The urgent thing doesn't mean it's going to have the most impact to your business.
Yeah.
So you have to be like, I think that's a discipline that needs practicing, but ruthlessly prioritizing what's going to have the biggest impact to your business. Everything else can fall down the to-do list. That's a habit, and the sooner you can kind of practice that, your business will thank you. And then I don't have like books that I always reference. You know, a book early on that I really enjoyed reading was just the entrepreneurial story of Nike with Shoe Dog. So that was a really fun one, but I think I, again, sort of don't have a library of assets that I always go to. As I'm working through things, like different challenges that come up, I'll seek out, I'll just go on the internet and look at articles and read up on where I need to be right now.
Yeah.
But I kind of let my journey dictate what resources I need to pull in versus just always sort of like listening to podcasts or reading books just kind of aimlessly. I kind of need to be tailored right now to what's the challenge that I'm facing, and then I pull in resources there. And then, you know, having other founders that you can speak to has been just, there's something to say about the emotional support that you need, not just bouncing ideas off, but hey, this is really hard, or, you know, a lot of times, you know, if you're dealing with team things or people things or like investors and whatnot, like dealing with the human side of things can be tricky, and can be sort of emotionally taxing. And so having somebody else who sort of understands that experience it's just sometimes nice to to share.
And I'm going to have a little shameless plug here that if you don't have that community, we have a free group chat that I'll link in the show notes that you can join. It's all consumer brand builders. It's hosted on the platform Geneva. And if you're listening, you're invited. So I'll put that in the show notes. Georgie, thank you so much for chatting with me, and congratulations on everything. I'm so impressed watching your story, and personally, it's cheesy, but like personally, I find it very inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yay!